Hey everybody, welcome. My name is Kevin Jones and this is the Beginning Hunter video series here on YouTube. My goal with this program is to educate and inform you on everything that you will need to know about becoming a new hunter. We are wrapping up the 2020 archery season for Antelope here in Oregon. We are still at camp. We're just breaking everything down, putting everything back in the trucks, drinking a little bit of coffee. We've got a long drive ahead of us today, but before we do any of that, I wanted to share with you a few tips and tactics that we learned along the way. And although we were not successful in this hunt, this is our second time trying to bow hunt antelope. So if you are heading into the field trying to pursue antelope with a bow and arrow, this might be helpful to you. So these are your top 4 tips to pursue antelope. Tip number 1, find water. So when it comes to archery antelope, here in Oregon we've actually had not as much water as we usually do here in the southern part of the state, which allowed us to try to focus our areas on places that there are water, so like things like reservoirs, springs, things like that. When you go online, if you don't have OnX already, find OnX, download it, because it's basically like it's a giant mapping software program, and on your phone you can find all of these springs, all of the geysers, all of the reservoirs in your area that you're going to be hunting, and try to focus on those, because antelope need water. They're not going to be going a very long time without it, so they're going to be theoretically concentrating around reservoirs, springs, things like that. So if you are going out into the great unknown and pursuing archery antelope, a lot of people, what they'll do, and one of the things that we did was put our ground blinds on those water holes and wait for antelope to come in. So find water, not only for the antelope, but also for you. Here in Oregon, we actually have a couple creeks and streams and rivers that run around here. So try to find moving water, because we've been out here for 5 days, and every other day we would go down to the river, we'd take a bath, we'd relax, we'd cool off, things like that. So not only is it good for you, but it's good for the antelope as well. So find water. Tip number 2, optics. So optics, as you can imagine, are incredibly important, especially when you're checking these vast, wide open areas and prairies. Here in Oregon, what we've done is we would typically find big meadows. We'd hike in, we'd sit in the trees, and we'd glass the rim of all these meadows. But antelope aren't just going to be in the rims, they're going to be in the middle as well. One thing that we've noticed is that they don't really care if it's 94 degrees. And although you're in the middle of these meadows and prairies, like by yourself sometimes, trying to find that little piece of shade, they don't really care. They can stand out in the sun for as long as they need to. So, but yeah, optics will help you, because not only will allow you to glass around those prairies, but you can also try to find a little bit of elevation in some of these, if you have some terrain around, and sit on top, hopefully in a shady spot, and glass down into some of these really big basins. So with a spotting scope, that would be ideal. If you don't have a spotting scope, just use your binoculars. Tip number 3, try it all and the kitchen sink. So what I mean by that is, here in Oregon, what we did this trip, we were here for 5 days. It is a really tough year for antelope in Oregon. We hunted this same hunt 2 years ago, and we had a lot of success finding antelope. I passed up a shot on a doe antelope, because it's an either sex tag. But when I say try it all and the kitchen sink, is think about this strategically, right? So on this hunt, we sat in ground blinds. We also hiked in the woods. We hiked in the prairies. We drove. We checked out a lot of new spots. We probably put about 115, 120 miles on these vehicles, checking out new areas. And road hunting isn't really my thing, but it is when all the other tactics haven't really produced. So last year we had success with ground blinds. So we set up the ground blinds first things first on areas that we've seen antelope. So we saw a bunch of antelope on this trip, and we set the ground blind strategically, but it just didn't produce. So instead of just sitting in the ground blind for 5 days, hoping that your luck changes, try to find ways to diversify, right? So if ground blinds aren't working, go hiking. Check out new areas on foot. Go a couple miles from a road. Put the miles on your boots. If that's not working, check out new areas. Drive the truck, drive whatever you have, and park in some of these new areas and hike in a little bit and check out all these big prairies. And if they're not in the prairies, check the woods. If they're not in the woods, check the prairies, and just try to do everything you can. Another thing is hunt high and hunt low. So if you're not finding them low, maybe try a little bit more elevation. If you're not finding them there, try a bunch of elevation. And this trip, we didn't harvest any antelope, but we threw everything at it. We approached this really with a kind of strategic mindset of well, we're gonna, if we can't, you know, if what's the old saying? If you always do what you've always done, then you'll always get what you always got, right? So we weren't finding antelope, so let's switch it up. So that's what I mean. You know, try it all, and then the kitchen sink. So just throw everything at it. Try different tactics. Don't get bogged down in just one. Tip number 4, practice, practice, practice. So especially in the archery game out here, it's really deceptive because you think that you have a lot of reach with your bow, right? So if you're shooting out to 30, 40 yards, that's a good shot. That's a fair distance. But when you get out here, you realize how close that really is. And with these antelope, their eyesight is so good that you really need to overcome that. So try to practice out to further distances. If you don't feel comfortable, just practice more. Practice more, practice more. Get comfortable taking those 50, 60, 70 yard shots. Not saying that you will out in the field, but it would be a lot better if you came into a hunt knowing that you're confident out to 60, 65 yards because you've been practicing a lot. So don't be complacent with your 20 to 30 yard range. Try to be able to reach out there a little bit. So guys, that's it for this one. Like I said, we're just getting packed up. We're moving out, and you know, we're going to be looking forward to mule deer season here in Oregon as our next hunt. If this is helpful to you, hit the like button. It tells the YouTube machine that people are finding this content useful. And if you really liked it, consider subscribing to the channel. If you found use in this, odds are you'll find other videos that I produce useful as well. So we will see you next time. Bye.